Welcome to Auto News Talk. I am so glad you're tuning in because we have a fascinating situation to look at. I mean, look at the market. The average new car costs almost $50,000.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
It is. But the reason you might be, struggling to budget for a vehicle, it actually has less to do with standard inflation and more to do with, well, a shipping lane in the Middle East or like a geopolitical tech war with China.
Right, and a massive psychological shift happening right at the dealership desk.
Exactly, because the era of just walking in and haggling over the sticker price for, a shiny coat of paint, that's basically over. So, okay, let's unpack this.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are basically walking through the entire modern car buying ecosystem.
Yeah.
We will start where it hurts the most, right? At the sticker price and the gas pump, just to understand the raw economics of what people are actually willing to pay.
Right, the wallet issue.
Exactly. And from there, we need to map out the aggressive and honestly sometimes completely contradictory government policies that are reshaping the whole global supply chain.
Which is a mess.
It really is. And finally, we will land right back at the showroom to see how the actual transaction, the mechanics of handing over your money, is transforming in real time to adapt to this new reality.
I love that roadmap.
Yeah.
Because to understand what happens at a dealership, you first have to understand the sheer financial pressure buyers are under.
Absolutely.
Like looking at the market data from Kelley Blue Book, the pricing baseline has just fundamentally shifted. KBB data reveals that the average transaction price for a new vehicle is hovering right around $49,461.
Which is just, it's a staggering baseline.
It really is.
And that number, it represents a structural change in the industry. The KBB analysis notes that while the rapid, chaotic price growth we saw over the last couple of years is technically cooling off, prices remain stubbornly high.
Right, they aren't crashing down.
No, they aren't. And the mechanism driving that is what industry insiders call a mix shift.
Okay, right, let's explain that for a second.
Yeah.
Because it's not just that a base model sedan suddenly costs 50 grand.
Right.
It's about what people are actually buying and, honestly, more importantly, what automakers are choosing to build.
Yeah, automakers realized during supply chain crunches that if they only had enough microchips to build, say, 10,000 cars,
they shouldn't waste those chips on low-margin economy sedans.
Exactly. They put them in fully loaded, high-margin SUVs and full-size pickups.
Oh, wow.
And the KBB data explicitly shows the market is now heavily skewed toward these massive, expensive configurations. Because inventories remain incredibly tight in those specific segments, manufacturers, well, they feel absolutely no pressure to offer broad discounts.
So they just established a new, much higher pricing floor.
That's exactly it.
So the $20,000 entry-level car is practically extinct.
Pretty much.
But there is a massive exception to this trend, and it's electric vehicles. It is a total split screen.
Yeah.
You got these $70,000 pavement princess trucks holding their value.
Right.
And then you have EVs, where the KBB report shows prices are doing the exact opposite. Like, they are dropping fast.
They're dropping really fast.
Yeah, KBB points out that EV incentives are running at a massive 13.8% of the average transaction price. Automakers are over-leveraged on EV production and are now dangling these huge financial carrots, just to lure in price-sensitive buyers.
And the broader implication of that KBB data is that rising living costs are pushing folks who would traditionally buy a new commuter car straight into the used market.
Which completely alters the affordability baseline.
Exactly. But those heavy EV incentives are changing the math for consumers who might never have considered electric before.
Yeah, but my big question here, just looking at the KBB data, is what happens if the demand for those $70,000 SUVs suddenly craters?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. If the higher-end market cools off, that $49,000 average price might plummet. But let's stick with those falling ED prices for a minute, because the psychology of why consumers are buying them is, I think it's fascinating.
It is a massive shift.
It really is.
Yeah.
Shifting away from, saving the planet and moving straight toward saving their wallets.
Yeah, a separate industry report focusing on the EV manufacturer Polestar captures this psychological pivot perfectly.
Oh, yeah?
The demand for electric vehicles is now being driven heavily by global oil shocks. It's essentially a calculation of operating expenses over the lifetime of the vehicle.
And the really memorable detail from that report is Polestar's CEO literally noting a shift in the consumer mindset from range anxiety to pump anxiety.
Pump anxiety, yes.
Which is such a great phrase.
Yeah.
And when you look at the macroeconomic mechanics, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Benchmark crude prices jumped 50%, with Brent crude nearing $106 a barrel.
Right. And the Polestar report links this directly to geopolitical tensions, specifically highlighting disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is a huge deal.
It is. That is a massive global oil artery. When shipping lanes tighten thousands of miles away, the resulting spike hits your local gas station almost instantly.
Yeah, you feel it immediately.
Because of that direct hit to monthly budgets, the report implies that the immediate operating costs are starting to heavily outweigh those lingering consumer fears about public charging infrastructure.
It's pure survival math for your budget.
Exactly.
And it's bleeding into the secondary market too, right? Because the report notes huge momentum in the used EV market.
Yes, massive momentum.
Shoppers are doing the calculations and realizing a pre-owned EV, combined with those high gas prices, it offers an incredibly fast payback period.
It does.
If you're listening to this and you have a long commute, a used EV suddenly looks like a tech experiment and more like a financial shield.
That's a great way to put it.
But I want to push back on the manufacturer side of this for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
If EVs are the ultimate shield against the gas pump, right, and people really want them, why are EV makers bleeding so much cash?
Well,
Because the report mentions Polestar posted a $383 million loss in just the first quarter, despite their deliveries actually going up. How does that make sense?
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it really comes down to the brutal mechanics of scaling a new technology. Building an EV involves massive upfront costs.
Right.
You have battery materials, complex supply chain logistics, and huge software development budgets. And when you factor in the hyper-competitive price war we just talked about, where market leaders are slashing prices by that 13.8% to move inventory, smaller players like Polestar are forced to match those discounts just to stay relevant.
Oh, wow. So they have to eat the cost.
Exactly. They are selling more cars, but their profit margins are being completely compressed, sometimes straight into the negative.
It's literally a race to the bottom for the manufacturers, which, hey, is a temporary win for the buyer. Although one thing that makes me wonder, if global oil prices suddenly drop back down to, say, $70 a barrel, does all this pump anxiety just disappear?
Right.
Do consumers immediately forget about the savings and go right back to buying gas guzzlers? Trying to budget for a car right now is like trying to hit a moving target while running on a treadmill.
That vulnerability in consumer demand is exactly why automakers and buyers are so sensitive to outside forces. And it is not just the free market deciding the winners and losers here.
Not at all.
They're constantly being shoved around by aggressive and honestly sometimes completely contradictory government policies.
Yeah, our government's just sending incredibly mixed signals. Because while the UK is trying to figure out how to tax EVs without killing consumer demand, the US has the exact opposite problem.
Right.
They're trying to figure out how to keep artificially cheap EVs out of the country entirely. Let's look at the UK situation first, because it perfectly illustrates this policy whiplash.
It really does. According to a bulletin, the National Franchise Dealers Association, or the NFDA, is sounding the alarm. Okay.
They are warning that a new tax structure could completely derail EV adoption in the UK at a highly sensitive time. Right now, EVs account for 23.1% of the new car market there.
Which is pretty solid.
That is solid progress, but as the NFDA notes, it still falls short of what is needed to meet the government's mandated sales shares.
Right, because the UK has these strict zero-emission vehicle mandates, basically pushing manufacturers to sell more EVs.
Oh.
But simultaneously, the government is proposing a £200 annual vehicle excise duty.
Exactly.
That's essentially a road tax that would eliminate the long-standing financial exemption EV owners have enjoyed.
And the government's mechanical rationale is pretty straightforward. As EVs become a larger percentage of the cars on the road, the revenue from traditional gas taxes drops.
Right. Less gas sold, less tax money.
Yeah, so they need to align EV taxes with standard combustion cars to maintain infrastructure funding. But the dealers represented by the NFDA argue this sends incredibly mixed messages to the consumer. Oh, I can imagine. Imagine sitting at a dealership desk trying to budget for the next 5 years, and the dealer has to tell you, well, the government really wants you to buy this car, but they also might start taxing it next year to make up for lost revenue.
Right.
It's confusing.
The implication is that policy instability makes it literally impossible for dealers to confidently advise you on the lifetime cost of a vehicle.
Exactly. And the NFDA wants to keep the tax exemption in place until the EV market is truly self-sustaining.
But what is the actual numerical threshold for a self-sustaining market?
We don't know.
Right. The NFDA proposal leaves that entirely ambiguous. Like, is it 30% adoption, 50%? It feels like a moving goalpost.
It definitely does.
But shifting gears across the Atlantic, the U.S. isn't worried about taxing EVs, right? They're worried about a flood of cheap foreign EVs wiping out the domestic market entirely.
Yes. There is a major legislative push by Senator Bernie Moreno aimed at completely blocking Chinese-made vehicles and connected tech from the U.S. market.
The coverage of Moreno's push shows an intent to hermetically seal U.S. exposure to Chinese auto supply chains.
Hermetically seal. That is intense. And we have to be clear about the mechanics of this proposed ban, because it isn't just stopping cars that are fully assembled in Beijing from rolling off a boat in California.
No, it goes much deeper.
It targets the entire deep-tier supply chain to close back doors. For example, stopping a Chinese firm from setting up a manufacturing plant in Mexico to bypass import tariffs under the USMCA trade agreement.
Right. And the rationale outlined in the Moreno coverage is twofold. First, you have the economic argument. U.S. automakers state they can compete with private companies on a level playing field.
Sure.
But they argue they cannot compete with state-subsidized entities that receive massive financial backing and artificial cost advantages from the Chinese government.
Right.
Second, and this is heavily emphasized, is national security.
Because modern cars are basically rolling smartphones.
Exactly. They are massive data collection nodes. Connected vehicles capture internal and external video, high-resolution photos, detailed location and navigation histories, and biometric owner data.
Yeah, that's a lot of data.
It is. And the security concern raised is that Chinese law could legally compel these companies to share that harvested data directly with the state. The coverage specifically pointed to BYD, a major Chinese automaker, and its defense work as heightening that perceived security risk.
Wow. And I saw that Moreno also criticized current federal EV spending in the U.S., arguing it has been incredibly costly, but has delivered limited impact on actual affordability and consumer adoption.
Yes, it did point that out.
The overarching implication of this ban is a desire to protect domestic automaker equity and insulate local dealership valuations from being undercut. But implementing a ban this wide, it guarantees massive, sweeping disruptions for automakers who rely heavily on global parts networks.
The friction here is immense. Governments are trying to balance aggressive environmental mandates, domestic job protection, national security concerns, and consumer affordability all at the exact same time.
It's impossible.
When you pull the lever to protect domestic jobs, you inevitably drive up the cost of the vehicle for the consumer.
And practically speaking, how do you even enforce a ban on a fully globalized supply chain? If a tiny 5-cent sensor in the steering column traces back to a Chinese supplier, does the entire vehicle get impounded at the border?
It's a huge logistical question.
Yeah, the exact legal definition of a Chinese-connected supply chain feels almost impossible to pin down in reality. But all of this macro-level chaos, the inflated sticker prices, the confusing tax proposals, the international supply chain bans, it all eventually trickles down to one specific place.
The showroom floor.
The showroom floor. Dealerships are being forced to completely overhaul the customer experience just to survive.
This is exactly where the geopolitical forces meet the microtransaction. Interestingly, a detail from the Moreno coverage provides a perfect bridge here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Alongside his push for the supply chain ban, Senator Moreno praised FTC actions that urged dealers to present out-the-door pricing up front.
Wow.
And that regulatory pressure perfectly mirrors a massive operational shift detailed in another report focusing on modern dealership practices.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Research shows that nearly 95% of Americans avoid negotiating at least some of the time.
95%.
Think about that. We universally hate it. The traditional 4-hour wait in the finance office feels like a hostage negotiation where you eventually just agree to buy the undercoating so they'll unlock the doors and let you go home.
It is an outdated adversarial model clashing with a modern, hyper-informed consumer. Dealerships are realizing that the era of hiding the ball is ending.
Yeah.
They are being forced into transparent, consistent pricing models. Buyers are walking in demanding that the exact numbers they calculated on their phone at home perfectly match the numbers presented on the screen in the showroom.
So the dealership is trying to become less like a high-stakes bazaar and more like an Apple store, where the price is the price and the staff is just there to show you how the tech works.
Exactly.
But let's look at the mechanics of this, because dealerships still need to make money. If they aren't aggressively haggling over the base sticker price, where does the margin come from?
It shifts.
To me, it seems like dealerships are actually weaponizing this transparency. Like buying a car right now is like buying a subsidized printer. The hardware of the car itself might be set at a fixed, non-negotiable price to gain your trust and get you in the door, but they make all their profit on the ink.
That is a perfect analogy. And that ink being the software subscriptions, the financing products, and the long-term maintenance packages.
Right.
That is exactly the operational shift outlined in the report. Dealerships are radically retraining their salespeople. Instead of wearing you down in a psychological battle over the base price, they are transitioning staff into product guides. They spend the time explaining how the EV charging infrastructure works, or how to set up the complex driver assist technology.
And what about the high-pressure finance office pitch, the thing everybody dreads?
It's being pulled forward. The profit margin is shifting toward early integrated presentations of maintenance packages and protection plans.
Oh, I see.
They frame it as customizing your ownership experience right from the start, rather than a surprise add-on at the end of a grueling 4-hour ordeal.
Which feels a lot better for the buyer.
It does. The implication is stark. Dealerships that fail to unify their online and in-store software to provide the seamless, transparent experience, they will lose consumer trust and ultimately the long-term service retention where the real money is made.
Transparency as a survival tactic. I mean, it makes sense on paper. I do wonder, though, if a software update is really going to fix the human bottlenecks at a dealership. I love the idea of upfront pricing, but what this shift doesn't answer yet is whether all this transparency will actually succeed in reducing that agonizing 3 to 4 hour wait time in practice.
That is the ultimate test. And this raises an important question. How do all these disparate moving parts actually fit together for the person listening to this?
Yeah, let's tie it all together.
If we synthesize everything we've unpacked, 3 distinct themes emerge across the board. First, raw affordability is the ultimate driver of consumer behavior. We saw that in the KBB data showing the market shifting in response to massive EV incentives, and the Polestar note proving that pump anxiety and monthly operating budgets are vastly outweighing environmental ideals.
Totally. And the second theme is that policy is violently colliding with market reality. You have the NFDA in the UK fighting a 200-pound tax because it threatens a highly fragile EV market.
Right.
While in the U.S., Senator Moreno is pushing for a hermetically sealed supply chain that aims to protect domestic profits, but risks disrupting global manufacturing entirely.
Exactly. And third, there is an undeniable systemic demand for radical transparency. The FTC is pushing for it at the federal level, and the operational shift at the dealership toward upfront, non-negotiable pricing proves that the hyper-informed buyer is dictating the terms of engagement.
Yeah, they have the power now.
They do. And these themes expose 2 major structural tensions in the auto industry. First is the tension between government goals and government actions.
Right. Mandating zero-emission vehicles to save the environment while simultaneously trying to figure out how to tax them. Or demanding affordable EVs for citizens while trying to block the absolute cheapest foreign supply from crossing the border. It's wild.
It is. And the second tension is between consumer savings and automaker survival. Consumers are taking advantage of heavy EV incentives and lowering their pump anxiety, which KBB and Polestar both confirmed.
Yeah.
But those same discounts are causing hypercompetition, compressed margins, and massive financial losses for the companies actually trying to build the cars.
The entire ecosystem is rebalancing, and it is a volatile, expensive process. So what does this all mean for you? If you are a buyer stepping into this market, the power dynamic has completely shifted. Your leverage isn't in your ability to aggressively haggle across a desk for 3 hours. It's in doing your homework online.
Yes.
It's in demanding that the digital price matches the showroom reality and understanding exactly what you were paying for before you even step foot in the finance office.
You are no longer just buying a mechanical machine. You are navigating a highly complex financial and geopolitical transaction.
And as these cars become more like giant rolling computers connected to global data networks, we have to ask, will we soon reach a point where we start buying vehicles based on their software update policies and data privacy agreements, rather than their horsepower? It's something to think about.
Absolutely.
Keep a close eye on the total cost of ownership over the sticker price. Factor in the insurance, the daily fuel or charging cost, and the potential for new government taxes before you sign anything. Thanks for joining us on Auto News Talk.